Okay, check 1 2, check 1 2, gonna go live. Let me know if you're hanging out in Slack. I wanted to, well, first let me say happy Valentine's Day to everybody. I know on the East Coast we're getting into the evening, so I'm gonna try to keep this brief. I wanted to just very quickly run through an overview of this design project, get it on the record, get it on video, get it on YouTube, so that if there's any questions over the next few days going into this weekend, hopefully it can clear up any confusion. And Terrell was asking in the Slack channel, so I wanted to do something quickly. We have our regularly scheduled live stream tomorrow morning, but we're going to have a guest live streamer, Jenny, who's going to do some typography stuff, which I'm really excited to see, so that's going to be cool. But for now, I just want to talk about this Class 1 project. And let me pull up the page where we have it here. And so essentially, for our Class 1 students, you've got access to this page, you've seen it, I'll quickly go over. Basically what we want to do is work on creating a composition that we can animate. Now you can create 2 compositions if you want, but 1 is the minimum. And basically what we want you to do is use Photoshop and then 1 other piece of software, right? We want you to finish in Photoshop and export out of Photoshop into After Effects. But using Illustrator or Cinema 4D. And it's going to go for the next 4 weeks. Here in week 4, doing the pre-production document where we want you to think about a general theme for your composition, for your frame, and put together some mood boards and kind of some of that really basic pre-production stuff. Week 5, a first draft of your design that we can look at and your mentor and peers can look at. And then doing some revisions on that in week 6, and then in that final week, finding a way to apply some animation principles, breaking things up, and giving it some life, giving it some motion. So that is going to be basically what this assignment is about, a focus on design. And I want to point to, in Motion Design 101, let me make sure, let's see, is there a time length target? There is not a time length target, Steve, that's a good question. As long as it needs to be to bring this little vignette, this little moment to life. If it's 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, that's okay. So there's not a specific time limit. Inside of Motion Design 101, I think a helpful post is on design principles. I think they're all going to be helpful. Color theory and design principles are probably going to be 2 that we really harp on over the next several weeks. I'm really big about, especially if you're new to visual design, is kind of leaning on some of these tried and true design principles that can act as a guide. Contrast, repetition, alignment. And let me pull up this old document for a slightly more visual look. There are more design principles than this, but I like to keep it to these 10 for simplicity's sake. And I would say that the first thing to think about in your composition is actually the design principle of emphasis. I think once you can decide what is going to be the emphasis of your scene, where you're going to lead the viewer's eye, then a lot of these other ones, like balancing the composition symmetrically, asymmetrically, having variety, making sure that you have a variety of elements, that it's not just super plain. The principle of unity is a little more subtle, but that's kind of to say everything is in agreement. The principle of contrast kind of underpins basically all things that are visually appealing and interesting, right? Contrast in forms, in size, in value, in texture, and in color. So be sure to look at the design principles post. Think about these as you get into designing your composition, to ask yourself, does my frame have a clear emphasis? Do I have enough variety in my frame? Do I have contrast? Let's see. The basic process that I always like to tell people starting out in visual design is concept to form to color to texture, right? It starts with the concept. That's why we're asking you to do a pre-production document, right? Thinking about what is your theme. Is it coffee? Is it politics? Is it space? Some kind of starting point to give you some guide rails. And then into form. What visual space are you going to use within the composition? And then rendering an image or finishing an image is kind of about color and texture. So again, looking at the color theory post is going to be another really helpful one. If you're totally new to color, like I found these super, super useful in the videos in here. Look at this guy. What's he talking about here? Allowing yourself to and let me just go to the actual palettes and the names of the palettes. You know, when I first started out using color, I found it really confusing. I was defaulting to just a lot of white and gray. I found it super helpful to kind of open my art books and learn about what is a complementary color scheme, what is a split complementary, what is, you know, a triadic color scheme. Just some little rules that you can lean on to help you try to craft a visually appealing color scheme. So again, concept to form to color to texture. Now, I want to talk a little bit about kind of the potential directions you could take this, and something that hopefully you were able to kind of think through a little bit within your pre-production document was generally what type of style you were going to pursue with your frame. And I'm just going to pull up my portfolio, which has not been updated in some time, but just to quickly talk about the totally, you know, different approaches that you could take to create a composition. So this was some conference opener materials. Obviously, I'm inside of Cinema 4D, creating 3D objects. I've got kind of a 3D mesh going crazy in the background. And inside of Illustrator and Photoshop, I was able to add some of the text that we need, add some just shape overlays that are kind of screened into the image as well to do a bit of finishing there, doing a bit of masking, adding some texture over the top. A totally different approach, right? Just kind of pure glossy 3D. This was some spec work from my agency days, doing some Adidas throwback Run DMC stuff. It was a cool little project where we've got the old classic shoe on a turntable, got the gold chain and all that sort of thing. Another direction you could go using Cinema 4D. Still another direction you could go, right? Hand painted, right, in Photoshop. I'm drawing and painting inside of Photoshop. I did do some of my base shapes in Illustrator here, and then come into Photoshop and paint over the top of it. If you are totally new to that process of laying down shapes inside of Illustrator, let me go back here. If you're totally new to starting in Illustrator and finishing in Photoshop and doing painting, that's why I was really excited to give everybody access to the Introduction to Illustration stuff that Steve put together for us, which, you know, goes really briefly but in a, you know, really succinct manner, talking about this workflow button by button, right? Laying down shapes in Illustrator, starting with a sketch. Here he was starting with a sketch. You don't necessarily have to do that. But talking about layer mask, talking about painting, and doing all that sort of thing. So let's see, various directions you could take it. And then even still, so this is more Adobe Illustrator heavy, right? That kind of explainer style that we see so much. This was some agency stuff from a few years back where we're doing something for a dentist, or like an insurance company for a dentist, where I'm doing 90% of it inside of Illustrator, right? Kind of laying down all these little shapes to create some dimension, and then finishing it in Photoshop, adding some texture on the edges, painting in some texture here and there, that sort of thing. Another great place to find just pure visual inspiration, if you're still not sure like how you want to render it or what, you know, pieces of software you want to use, is to take a look at the student work page from MoGraph Mentor, seeing what students have done in the past. You know, you'll see everything from pure glossy C4D stuff to more hand-drawn, kind of rough-edged line work. This really nice one from Travis, you know, starting inside of Adobe Illustrator to lay down shapes, taking things into Photoshop, kind of beating it up a little bit. And still, so another direction that you could take it is something that I think you could term kind of mixed media, like actually just grabbing stock images or finding images online for your theme. And this was for, this was actually for a pitch that didn't end up going anywhere. Let's see if I still had it up. With CNN, where we're taking these images, taking it into Photoshop, using the magic wand tool, kind of erasing, keying out the background, creating compositions based just simply on images. Now, since this is student work and no one's paying you to do the work, you've got kind of a Creative Commons open door policy in terms of using, like just grabbing a tree online if you need a tree, or if your theme is coffee and you want to grab a coffee mug, doing that kind of mixed media style. Totally acceptable to use stock images from the internet. Another thing I would point you to, if you're going to do C4D, you could also use some stock 3D elements. I'm here on the 3dwarehouse.sketchup.com. If you just Google, actually the Google 3D Warehouse, which is what I usually search, the Google 3D Warehouse, it's just this huge database of 3D files. Now the only trick is just making sure that there is a file type that you could bring into Cinema 4D. And so here at the bottom, if you can see, it says a collada file, which Cinema 4D can interpret those polygons. So let's say I wanted to do something with this skull model, create a cool composition with the skull, light it in an interesting way, maybe put some text over the top. Just coming in here, grabbing this element as an element for your piece, for your composition, is also an acceptable way to start building out your scene, right? Not everything has to be custom illustrated from scratch, right? You can take a kind of mixed media approach or existing elements. I'm bringing up Ariel Costa's portfolio here because he's kind of a master of this mixed media style, where he's taking images, he's cutting them up, he's creating super interesting, character animation rigs, which is cool. But I mostly wanted to show it just for the sake of talking about this mixed media style, right? Going from existing images, using texture, using color, creating interesting animations that way. And if you actually go to his site, and we'll go ahead and we'll actually link up this. He has a link on his portfolio called Textures, which actually links to a Gumroad page here, where you can have a bunch of the textures that he uses for free, right? He's got like a name your price tool, but essentially he's giving it away for free if you want to be able to use it. And I'll actually, make sure that resource is put in there as well. So we want this project to be an opportunity for you to do some layout, right? For you to do some composition work. And again, we're style agnostic here at MoGraph Mentor. It isn't about us telling you to do a specific style. It's more about being able to kind of come back to this information here, that once you have that first draft of a composition going, we can ask the questions of, can we push the contrast in any direction? Is the emphasis clear? How are the colors working together? Is there an opportunity to use texture in a specific way? And kind of have those deep dive, detail conversations about your composition. And then, of course, in a couple of weeks, then we'll get into more of a discussion about making sure everything is imported correctly into After Effects, working at the right resolution and all that good stuff, and then trying to bring it to life, and then kind of looping back around to that conversation about animation principles, about timing, about exaggeration, staging, things of that nature. So the project is a little bit open-ended, right? We've always done this at MoGraph Mentor, where we're not going to tell you exactly what to make, and I understand that that's more difficult. It'd be easier to just give you a super, super specific thing to design. But really, this is more about trying to integrate the tools, integrate the pieces of software, while trying to keep an eye on these big picture concepts of design principles. So I would encourage you again to look at that information within the Motion Design 101 curriculum here, as well as the color theory stuff, which is super straightforward, super basic information that you can basically find anywhere, but we've put it here to try to make it as easy as possible. So that's my spiel. I wanted to keep it super short. If there's any questions, I'm going to hang out for a few minutes. I see Steve's hanging out. And hopefully this clears it up a little bit. I understand the project is open-ended, but that's kind of how we want it, actually. That's how I want it, is to, first of all, see the themes that you're interested in, right? I want to see your voice as an artist. I want to see the things that you're interested in as topics. And then we want to get into trying to create compelling, visually appealing compositions. And again, if it's like the first time you've ever designed anything, the path to creating things that are visually appealing typically run through these design principles, right? If these things are present within a composition, within an image, it's typically pretty visually compelling. Now, we're taking a pretty technical approach to this, which I think is certainly okay in this kind of art school environment for people who are maybe doing it for the first time or trying to refine these skills. But really the thing about design principles is to get it in your head so that eventually you're not really thinking about it, right? It becomes kind of second nature, where then you can critique your own work, critique other people's work, your collaborators in the future, to say, you know, this frame isn't doing it for me because I don't think there's a clear emphasis, or, you know, I don't like the contrast in size that you have. Everything is the same size, and I think you should push your scale hierarchies to a more extreme type of contrast. Or, you know, everything's really, really flat. Can we add some texture? Can we give it a kind of a tactile feel? So it's a lot to kind of weave together all at once, but this is, in effect, the role of being a designer. So let's see. Steve says, I was wondering if agencies are ever given make us a video as their client input with no other guidance like this project. I think that happens all the time, Steve. I think it happens in the sense that, you know, a client comes and says, you know, we need to make a film about dental insurance, but like it's up to you guys to storyboard and design and come up with art direction. And like, so starting from a theme or a topic tends to be, you know, I think pretty in line actually with how it goes in terms of working with agencies. I mean, in another respect, you know, amazing studios like Buck and Giant Ant appear to be getting briefs, something along the line of make something cool, make something beautiful, and, you know, end with our logo. Try to keep it within the, you know, within the theme of what they do. So in my experience, clients typically don't know what they want. That's why they're coming to us. You know, if they do dental insurance, they say, hey, we sell dental insurance and we need to make a video about it. And then that's where we come in, right? To say, okay, let's reverse engineer this thing. Let's think about the things related to dentists. You know, then we start the Google image searching of, you know, looking at the tools, thinking about, you know, various things related to that theme or topic. And then getting into storyboarding, getting into design, and trying to pitch them on something that looks good. Yeah, good book. That's a great example, Steve. That Buck piece. Let's see. I think it was Good Books. Yeah, Metamorphosis, right? Yeah. How's that for a brief of just you know, do something with this book, and go crazy. But yes, this was absurdly good. You know, so much flash animation, so much. Look at all these awards. Yeah, absolutely deserves it. So that's my spiel for now. I will post this video, and if there's any questions, let's keep the conversation going in Slack. I'm excited to see the various topics that you all are interested in working on, and then these first drafts of design. And Chris says, super lost on this project. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Chris. I'm glad we're able to talk about it now. Steve's going to link up the Good Books short film here, which is just a tour de force of frame-by-frame animation, absurdly good. We never got to the stage, but on this stuff, we were doing some stuff of like, you know, it was a pitch, we didn't win it, but thinking about, this is actually a reference to kind of blood and soil nationalism, politics. We're giving Trump a hard time here about it. But we did some other frames too with Obama that was more of like, the intelligent man theory. So I think there was like a blackboard at one point and like a stock market thing, going up, and a little bit of a shot in the dark here that didn't end up working out entirely. Let's see. My desktop is all over the place. And then sometimes, you get straight like stuff that's just going to be done in Illustrator and or straight in Cinema 4D. So Steve says, I just pulled a topic from the National Day calendar for an idea. Okay, nice. Yeah, and that's the other thing, like pick a theme, pick a topic, coffee, space, politics, sports, LeBron James, an individual. It almost doesn't matter so much, right? Like just decide on something and then make the decision about the type of process that you're going to pursue. Are you going to do something? And that's why in your pre-production, it's important to try to look at references, right? To give yourself an idea. Are you going to do something like really, really mixed media where you're going to take images, key out the backgrounds, do that whole thing? Are you going to do something that's super illustrated where everything looks hand-drawn and everything has that illustration feel, kind of maybe something more in this direction? Are you going to do something more 3D? Are your core elements going to come out of Cinema 4D? I'm a big fan of the 3D warehouse for stuff like this, in terms of, base elements. The skull is a popular trope. I'm not saying you need to use the skull, but whatever it is related to your topic. So that's why picking a topic and then trying to kind of extrapolate out from that is what we think is a pretty good approach to this. And we want you to do this because, one, we want to have the discussion about composition, about framing, about these design principles, right? Is there contrast? Is there rhythm? Is there a variety? Is there a clear emphasis? The other reason we want you to do it is just kind of this right here. Like, one of the big things I want for all of you is to fill up a portfolio, right? My portfolio, which I don't give nearly as much love as I do, I haven't updated in a long time, is like some of this was spec stuff. Some of this never got animated, right? We were doing a pitch for, I think we did some animation here, but we're doing a pitch for like a Chinese TV commercial, branding for a TV network, not a commercial, where we're doing the sting and the logo and the lower thirds and the coming up next type motion tests. And it never went into production, but again, it's something I can have in the portfolio. Boards for Lenovo, right? Concept boards where they had this new thing, and we're trying to come up with these billboard ads for them. And again, never went into production, never got picked up, but something I can have in my portfolio to use for the next client. And so in terms of finding styles that you're interested in, that you want to have in your portfolio. Now, if you're so new to this and you're thinking, I'm not going to be ready to put this in my portfolio, that's okay too. Of course, this is about learning. But I suspect over this 4-week period, many of you are going to end up with something that is worthy of a square on your portfolio, right? We're going to try to get it to a polished state, try to get something that looks really dialed in, that's in a specific style, that is really coherent in terms of a concept, because this is the game, right? This is the whole game, is filling up a portfolio for each of you so that you can leave MoGraph Mentor and go to clients and go to agencies and show them your abilities, show them your good polished work, and make a living doing it. So we want to do this as an educational experience to get into a conversation about design principles and color theory, but if we can end up with something that can be a square in your portfolio, then it's a really, really big win. And that's what we want for all of you, of course, so that you can move your career forward. So If there's any questions right now, I'll hang out for another minute or two. If not, if you think of something in a few hours, let's keep the conversation going here inside of Slack. We are going to have the regularly scheduled stream tomorrow at 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific. We have a guest streamer. Her name is Jenny. She's a whiz with typography, and we don't have a ton of typography content on the site, so I asked her if she'd be willing to share a bit about her process. It's more of that kind of calligraphy type, but she does different styles. So I'm excited to have Jenny share with us a little bit tomorrow. But we'll continue the conversation about this design project that's going to eat up these next 4 weeks. And hopefully this helps clear it up a little bit, and we can just keep it going. So doesn't appear to be any questions. Everybody have a great Valentine's Day. I hope you've got something good planned. I apologize for doing this after